Hello everyone, we're going to get started here. I'm Michael Pagel, Program Manager for Greening Healthcare, and this is From Good to Great, Ontario's growing fleet of high-efficiency P3 hospitals. The purpose of this webinar is to review our analysis of all the new P3 hospitals, present that analysis to you, and really identify from that which are the high-performing sites, how well are they doing, and then to help kind of the rest of the group work towards achieving that same level, because as all new hospitals, there should be no reason why not everybody could be at the top of the benchmark charts. I'll remind you of the data analysis in this. When we speak of targets, that's our Greening Healthcare program targets. That'll be explained in full, but that does not relate to any sort of contracts or agreements that are in place. We're also going to be reviewing lessons learned for hospitals in the next generation that are currently being built or planned, so that this type of data can really help drive the performance of hospitals that are still in production phases. Please feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A option. Amdeep Beal, who is the Technical Director of the Climate Challenge Network, will be responding to questions. We'll also be addressing them live with our speakers. We have a number of hospital speakers today. And we will post any that we don't get to after the webinar, as well as to include this in an update report that we've published the last couple of years. As a reminder, all the data today is anonymous. We've received feedback that this is the best way to present the information. Some of them that are the top performing sites will obviously be identified. So all hospitals on this call that have new hospitals in this data, you should have your code. Otherwise, you can email me and I can send that to you or ask in the chat. And I think we're ready to get started. Thank you to our sponsors as always, Save On Energy and Enbridge. And I'll pass it on to Ian Jarvis, who is the Executive Director of the Climate Challenge Network, to go through the agenda with you.
Great, thank you, Michael. As Michael said, this is the third year we've been providing this information. The first year was kind of brand new and fascinating. The second and third years are updates, and I think even we are kind of surprised by how far the story has evolved over these 3 years. This obviously is out of the 17 hospitals, 16 reported this year. It was just North Bay that weren't able to get data to us in time. And the story that's unfolding for 3 groups is fascinating for us. So the agenda we want to look at today, there's a certain amount of information you have to have about how we set targets within Greening Healthcare. So I apologize for putting you through that part of the conversation, but the goal is to get every one of the P3 hospitals in this group and every one that will follow in the immediate future and over the next 30 years to the top of this benchmark chart. As Michael said, there's no reason why everybody can't be there. And we think the path to the top of the benchmark chart is through learning the lessons that are being kind of sometimes painfully acquired over the course of how this whole P3 adventure is unfolding over time. So the first chunk of this conversation is around the background and the results. We'll share those with you. Then we have 3 panel discussions to bring up the rest, each kind of going after the groups I talked about. The first one is recognizing the top performing hospitals. There are some world-class results coming out of a number of these hospitals, and there are a few that you'll see from the data are kind of moving into that top area here. We at Greening Healthcare spent a fair amount of time scanning the world as to where are other good programs of this nature going on. We can't find anything. So we think this is a world-class initiative that's underway here. Credit to all the parties involved, and it always comes down to the hard work at the individual facilities that gets us there. So we want to be recognizing top performers, and we want to have a discussion with panelists from among the top performers about what makes them special. We then want to talk about the group that's moving up the benchmark chart, the ones that are in the process of improving. And again, we have a panel that has that experience of how do you go from good to great, how do you work your way up through that process. And once again, there are practical challenges on the ground within the facility. And then there's always, how does the performance agreement marry in and either help or hinder progress towards great results? We expect to hear even more about that this year. And you'll see we've given the biggest piece of the time to perhaps a priority group, which is the new hospitals in the pipeline. Say by our count, IO has about 30 in their latest report going out probably over the next 20 years. And the lessons being learned here can make every one of those not just as good, but kind of building on successes here and become even better still. So again, world-class program. Those are the 4 chunks that we would like to work through here. As Michael mentioned, please use the Q&A because that way the questions get recorded. Amandeep will be fielding those questions and passing, and some of them he'll respond to directly, some we'll deal with after the webinar if they don't fit directly in. Amandeep will be screening those and feeding some of them to us to review with the panels. We want this to be interactive. We want everybody's questions to be answered here so everybody can go from good to great. So that's the beginning. If we track onto the background, these are the 16 hospitals taking part. I'd say the only one we missed this year was North Bay. They couldn't get the data to us quite in time. And Eddie, we're expecting Etobicoke General will be added to this mix next year. So William Osler will be there. Eddie will be speaking later today. But this is the full group of the hospitals that say are taking part at this time. We will be reaching out to Mackenzie Vaughan and Westpark and others as they come on stream as soon as they've got a year of operating data to have them come in. So the story should get bigger as well as richer each year. So this is your group. And going back to Michael's comment, if you're on the line and you're one of these hospitals and you don't know what your code is, you need to know your code. So this is your first chance to use the question and answer thing and just drop a note to Michael and he'll tell you. Then you can follow your hospital through the story in the report today. So that's the group. And here for us is one of the first important and fascinating kind of results coming out of this. This is the history since the first year of data we have with these hospitals, which in some cases goes back just a few years and others is since the first year that they were open. And the big story here is that almost all of them have achieved energy savings, net energy savings since they started up, despite the fact in some cases the intensity of use has gone up a little bit. But the overall savings, the big improvement being in natural gas. So that makes Climate Challenge Network happy because our only mandate in life is to accelerate reduction in greenhouse gas emissions across all building sectors. And in Ontario, the gas savings and steam savings are obviously where the big emissions reductions are. So this for us is kind of meeting our mandate. Some of these numbers are quite dramatic. You'll see 4 hospitals at the top with gas and steam savings in excess of 30% since they first opened. And we're going to get a little bit over the course of today into what's that all about? Like what's the common themes? And more importantly, what should hospitals in the pipeline and other hospitals that haven't seen these kinds of reductions yet, what's involved there? Overall, electricity has crept up, which we see as a sign of the higher intensity of use as the hospitals kind of get established and work their way through. So the big story here is for us is getting control of the HVAC systems, especially the central plant, and as we say in the agenda, harnessing the potential of these more complex but massively more efficient plant than the good old days of steam, and electricity creeping up in general as a result of higher intensity use within the facilities. So that's the story so far. Again, that will be updated again next year as things kind of work their way through. And again, this is a bit of a tutorial that we have to put everybody through. Benchmarking is not just a way of ranking buildings. It's a diagnostic support to allow any hospital to have a pretty good sense of where to look for areas for improvement. So what you'll see in the table that summarizes the results for this year is electricity broken into two components. And I think you get the hang of this. Base electricity is all of those things: equipment, fans, pumps, elevators, everything that runs year round is in base electricity. The cooling electricity is the extra use in the summer for air conditioning. And the separation is done. It's pretty simple math, as the technical folks on the line know. From the monthly billing data, it's just linear regression that separates the weather sensitive cooling part out from the base electric year round. If you're using too much energy in cooling electricity, you know to use at the cooling plant. If you're using too much in base electricity, generally it's fans, it can be lighting, and so on. So when you see your strengths and weaknesses by energy component, you have a pretty good sense of where to look. On the gas or steam side, on the thermal side, it's the same idea. You've got loads that run year round, the green ones here. Which yes?
Sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your screen? Are you, because
oh yes.
Well, I don't see it. I just want to make sure other people see it.
Thank you, Cliff. Are we online, Michael? Is it working?
I can see it.
I'm good.
Yes.
Okay. Somehow I'm not seeing it, but I just want to make sure everybody's good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, see if you can get back in, Cliff, because they're really pretty graphics.
Yeah, I know. So I'm missing out on it. So I'll come back in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So again, your benchmarking, when you see this, all the Greening Healthcare members get this updated every year. You got 4 energy components, and you're then interested in how you're doing overall, but then within each component, it's telling you which building systems to look at to make the improvements. So as we get into benchmarking, that separation into 4 components is important. And then the targets that are set have been developed. They get updated every year by Michael. They're typically based on weather normalized top quartile levels for all hospitals. So we've not adapted these targets to suit the higher efficiency of a number of the new hospitals. When you see the comparisons on the report coming up, that is compared with the whole group, including older hospitals and hospitals in Alberta, weather normalized, and across Ontario. So these targets are generic targets for all hospitals at this point in time. We are contemplating separating out the new hospitals at some point in the future as more and more of you start achieving levels which are just beyond what these numbers are looking at. So the target for each facility is created by Michael based on the percentage of space you have of your total building area that you have in each one of these space categories. Ambulatory care we've added for the first time this year. And it's a very small data set. I think we have 1 hospital in Alberta and 3 or 4 in Ontario. And so we've done some interpolation between acute care and medical buildings to get numbers here that make sense alongside the data set we've seen right now. And again, as that data set grows over time, we will be working on we'll be working on refining that ambulatory care target based, again, aiming generally at the top quartile level of each hospital type. And as you can imagine, since all the hospitals are improving year after year, that's how the targets incrementally get better every year. So the expectations get raised. So these are the targets you're being measured against right now. Let me pause for a moment. Amandeep, any questions or?
No questions here. No
Okay,
questions.
okay. So once those targets are set based on space type, the adjustments to put your target where your building is actually located are adjusted for weather variations, so heating and cooling degree days. If you have a laundry, which we don't see any of those in Ontario these days, if you have absorption cooling, heat recovery chiller, again, is a new target adjustment that we've added because an increasing number of the new hospitals have heat recovery chillers. And you can imagine the effect of that is to move up the base electric because you'll run those machines year round, therefore, and displacing a fair amount of heat. So the heat recovery chiller adjustment allows for the fact that you need less gas, but you need a bit more electricity to run the machine. And once again, we have adjustments for parking garages where those exist. These are the only adjustments that are made at this time. For the new hospitals in this survey, we would love you to, we're not completely clear on all of the facilities. So if you have information in this, if you have characteristics in this area, please let us know and we can modify your target if necessary. The other space we're looking at right now is whether you're outsourcing or keeping in-house process loads such as MDRD. Historically, that has not been a big deal in acute care hospitals because reheat dominates. Reheat within the air handling system dominates that base thermal. But now you guys are bringing those numbers down so far, we're starting to get concerned that we need to adjust perhaps for process loads. So again, it's an unfolding story with respect to targets. We adjust them each year, but these are the adjustments that are built into the report.
Ian, we just have one quick question on how many facilities for each targets have we surveyed? So
yeah, so the current total number of hospitals is around 65. But the recent hospitals that we've looked at for various different reasons, there's well over 100 hospitals that form the data sets that drive the top quartile, that drive the targets. So it's not a massive data set, but it's significant.
Thanks, Ian.
So into the results. Michael, have you got the drum roll standing by? Can you do that for us? Because here's where we are, and this initially just gives you exactly what I was talking about. So you'll see that the top of the charts here alphabetically is C2, but this year for the first time we have 4 hospitals, C2, C1, A1, and C5, that are all straight greens, which means they're all either at or below the general all hospital targets that have been previously set. So that is real progress. So that's the most number that we've had at the top of this chart. Then we have 4 more hospitals in that top group, which we're categorizing as the top performers. And these are truly world-class kind of facilities in terms of energy efficiency, weather normalized. They're as good as we've been able to find anywhere. The other 4 in there have components that are still left. So C3 and C4, you can see, are still using more cooling electricity, and we would direct them if they asked, and we're always open for those conversations towards the chiller plant, to the cooling plant, to take a look at that. The 3 hospitals at the bottom have room to improve on base electric, and the A3 has room to improve on cooling electric. What's again interesting for us is the top 9 of these hospitals are all below the target in terms of thermal energy use, all straight greens. So these are by far the best results we've seen so far. They're enormously encouraging. That's what motivates us to keep doing this. If we look on the right-hand side there, by the way, because Laurie will shout at me later if we don't have gigajoules per square meter. So we've got gigajoules per square meter in there for your reference, along with equivalent kilowatt hours per square foot. They directly relate. For interest on the greenhouse gas numbers, the median Ontario hospital in our data set right now is running about 7 kilograms per square foot of greenhouse gas emissions. You'll see here we've got 2 or 3 that are getting pretty close to 2. And once again, if I could share, that's the stuff that excites us. If we can be running hospitals at 1/3 of the environmental footprint that we have historically, this for us is a massively positive thing. So again, this will be in the report that we'll be posting on the open website, open Greening Healthcare website after the webinar, along with a record of these proceedings and the questions and answers. But again, very encouraging results here. If you're in the bottom 8 hospitals, this should give you a pretty good sense of where your improvements lie. There's some really big numbers here in terms of base thermal and other components. And when you wish to, please contact us and we'll be happy, and you'll have the contact information at the end. Happy to talk a bit further about what these numbers are saying to you. So this is where we've gone. The other piece to this, which is kind of exciting, is the two columns. It's the same table as you saw a moment ago for reference, but the two columns in terms of electricity and thermal energy use. So we showed you earlier the really big improvement. So this is year on year. The previous chart we showed you was since opening of the hospital. So this is just year on year, how big the gas savings are. You see those highlighted in the second column, and a couple of hospitals with really nice improvements on the electrical side. So the trending for the first time is almost across the board positive in terms of the operational P3 hospitals. The performance is progressively improving as we learn a lot, as you learn a lot about how to manage these beasts. And the key for us is that all of this learning get kind of captured and fed back to all the hospitals in the pipeline, so that these lessons learned can be fed in from right now as you're in the midst of your development process. So just the final piece of reference in the background, which I think you'll find interesting. This is your hospitals, the new hospitals, compared to the whole data set of greening healthcare, and this is by savings potential, where the orangey color is by thermal energy, typically natural gas. The green is electricity. So you see across the board, hospitals have a lot of room to improve in terms of natural gas. And Greening Healthcare members will know you were doing a lot of work right now around low carbon heating plants, which is taking the lessons learned with these new hospitals and saying how over time can you apply the same principles to the heating plants for the older hospitals. You can see at the top, the little group, the 4 at the top there, where there's no savings potential based on these targets. And you can see a few hospitals where the savings potential is all electric. But the big trend here, the dark colored ones are all the new hospitals. And you can see to this point in time, the some that are shining and others are on the bottom of this chart, which means they have a lot of room to improve. And that's our focus going forward. So that's the background. That's how we're doing. That's the year-on-year progress. That's how the new hospitals compare with the older ones, mostly increasingly at the top of the charts and showing good things. And this is the distribution of other hospitals that gives a pretty good sense to everybody. First, how much room there is to improve. And we're talking about, I think, the total savings potential on that previous chart was $7.5 million a year. There's a big economic case to work through this, but also by components where to look for those savings. And we're hoping again over the coming 12 months to see a lot of activity with people focusing on those energy components and how can they improve those. So let me pause again, Amandeep, because this is the background kind of knowledge. Then now we start getting into the conversations. Any questions or protests so far?
No questions. There are a couple of them. Those are already addressed.
Okay.